Every time I record a video, I have like a little bit of a crisis thinking, is it bad for me to secure attention through these YouTube videos? I don't know. Anyways, Nameless Narcissist here once again, talking about NPD by a simple man diagnosed with NPD. Hopefully going to clear up some stigma and misconceptions. Keep in mind, I'm no clinician, so take that as you will. But I do read a lot, and I'm also diagnosed with NPD, so I have a pretty good idea how this shit works. Anyways, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Or just do it right now, actually. Just do it now. Why not? Who cares if you liked it or not? Anyways, if you like me, do that, please. Anyways. So, what we're talking about today, narcissistic supply, my drug of choice, right? First of all, I hate the term narcissistic supply just because it's so, like, theatrical. It's just us using methods to basically regulate our self-esteem. But before I dive into that a little bit more, I want to briefly take a little bit of a segue. I'm going to turn on my computer screen so that I can read this study. I usually turn it off so you don't have to deal with glare. I'm trying very hard to avoid it right now. But basically, I want to ask the question, why do people with NPD, there, the glare's gone, why do people with NPD need narcissistic supply? And when I say need, I'm not saying get pleasure from. I'm not saying, oh, it's something that we just kind of crave. It's not just an addiction, it is a need. And I feel like that's something that's very much overlooked and probably hard to understand by people who don't suffer from pathological narcissism. And I kind of want to cite this study to kind of illustrate what I mean by the need itself. This study was called "Narcissism is Associated with Weakened Frontostriatal Connectivity," a DTI study. First of all, I'm sorry that title is so convoluted. I hate it as much as you do. Because doesn't it feel like whenever there's like a title like that in a study, they're literally just trying to be like, hey, we're too smart for you to understand what the fuck we're talking about. When if they would have just used like normal people words, there would be no issues. Anyways, so basically what the study did was it took a bunch of people who were high in subclinical narcissism. And like people who scored very high in a shortened version of the narcissistic personality inventory. There's issues with that with the MPI, but ignore that for now. It's associated highly with narcissistic grandiosity, which is very important to keep in mind during this. These are basically people who are very, self-promoting, arrogant, etc., etc. But basically what they did was they put a bunch of people in these machines to fucking measure what the fuck their brains were doing, and they took two regions of the brain. One was like associated with reward and one was associated with the self. And people with high self-esteem have very high connectivity between those two areas, right? So they hypothesized that the reason that narcissistic individuals are so attention-seeking, so boastful and stuff, is that they're making up for a lack of connectivity between those two regions. And the results showed that was true. Basically, with people in this study, with people with subclinical narcissism, because they screened out people who were already diagnosed with psychiatric disorders. They were basically measuring trait narcissism, which is debatable whether that's on the same scale as pathological. That's a whole other fucking thing, though. But basically, they measured that there is lower connectivity between those two areas, and so basically what that is saying is these people are less able to get reward from their own implicit self-esteem than normal people, right? But that was not indicated on these self-report measures. Interesting thing. And that was just clinical narcissism. Another study that illustrates this point, I'll stop talking about studies soon, I swear. This is self-viewing is associated with negative effects rather than reward in highly narcissistic men. An fMRI study. That one was basically, they just showed a bunch of people, pictures of like people in their lives and of themselves, very like close succession. And a lot of good stuff in there, some good links. But the main takeaway was portions of the brains that were activated were not good ones when they looked at themselves. And this was measured for highly narcissistic people, like way high on the spectrum, and then super low on the spectrum, which makes sense. Why would you have if you're low in narcissism, that basically means you're not being self-promoting, you're not being arrogant, etc., etc. If you genuinely have high self-esteem, you don't need to partake in those behaviors. But with somebody with pathological narcissism, that first study that I was talking about indicates that literally in our brains, we cannot just feel good about being ourselves. That has some wild implications, doesn't it? There is literally a disconnect in my fucking head between me thinking about myself and positive effect, positive emotions and feelings. I gain no pleasure from just thinking about myself, which makes sense. I'm always thinking about my flaws. And so I am driven to make up for that, to constantly be on the lookout, to regulate my self-esteem, to secure this admiration from people so I can replace that deficit in my own head with that should be filled by my own self-esteem with other people's external validation. I really hope this is as fucking nuts to you guys as it is to me, because like this is like, obviously these studies have their limitations, but what it is showing is, well, one, kind of validating it, pathological narcissism as a mental health construct, and two, showing basically what psychodynamic theorists have been saying for a very, very long time. But, you know, like, another conversation. Sorry, I get so passionate about this. But to bring it back to my point, why do I need narcissistic supply? I need narcissistic supply because I am incapable of feeling good just by being a person, being alive, being a human. I see a lot of comments that are saying things like, oh, you need to love yourself, or you know the kind of things I mean. And I'm not, and like, and people who have said stuff like that, I do appreciate the sentiment. I'm not like trying to insult you guys or anything. But I am saying that the reason why that does not resonate with me at all, and why I like even have a hard time understanding it most of the time, I've openly said the idea of just feeling good about myself as a person doesn't make sense. It just doesn't click. Like, I am only what people are either, when people are either like, I'm only my accomplishments or what people are saying about me, about how great I am. Which is, so if anybody has made a comment like that and I haven't replied or been kind of dismissive of it, I apologize, that's why. Because my brain's fucked and there's a like I can't, that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not saying that that's a reason for me to just be like, oh, I just need narcissistic supply and I'll be fine. But it is saying why I struggle with that concept. But to go forward, the implications here are I can't feel good about myself unless people are telling me that I'm good. So what does that mean? There's some really big ethical questions here. Again, I don't really understand how self-esteem in a lot of people works, but so I may be misconstruing things a little bit. But if the only way that somebody with NPD can feel good about themselves is with admiration, or being praised, whatever, is it ethical to prop them up, basically, forcibly put them into more grandiose states on the assumption that they aren't being exploitative of others, obviously. Like I'm speaking purely to the people who are aware of their narcissistic tendencies and are actively working to not be destructive with them. But is that a long-term treatment for NPD? To find healthy ways for them to secure this admiration and like basically grandiosity from other people, since they are incapable of doing it themselves. I'm sure there's some arguments being made about, oh, like getting it from loved ones, for instance. Not forcibly or in an unfair way, but in a way that's like, oh, I love you because, you know, you're all these good things. And then the person being like, oh yeah, well, that makes me feel good about myself. Cool. I'm not sure how that would differ substantially from just other methods of getting narcissistic supply, like through achievements or through praise in general. But I don't have a clear answer to that, but I think it is something to think about in terms of what is a realistic treatment for narcissistic personality disorder, because as I have seen it, seems that remission is pretty fucking low nowadays. But now I want to also talk about, one, the term narcissistic supply. I hate it. It's fucking dumb. I feel it's just this term that kind of mystifies like what is just effectively us trying to regulate our self-esteem externally, since we cannot do it internally. And I don't like it for that reason. I should come up with a new name for it. Self-esteem juice. We're not calling it that, but I think that'd be funny. little tangent there. But I also want to talk about how I personally relate to narcissistic supply in terms of my personal experience. Because it's one thing to talk about it like this abstractly and like through the eyes of studies. It's one thing. It's another thing to talk about it through a narcissist experience, and that's like half the reason I made this channel, is to relate that portion of it. You can go read these studies yourself anytime. Only I can tell you what it actually feels like. So but to define that, what is narcissistic supply? Obviously, it's basically anything that can make you feel good about yourself, right? Everyone to some degree has narcissistic supply from certain areas of their life, right? But obviously the difference is my dependence on it and my insatiable need from it, but also the insurmountable pleasure I can get from it. And also sometimes the disappointment I feel with it. When I'm not expecting narcissistic supply in that way, I am like, I could be on fucking cloud 9. I turn into a different person. However, if I'm striving towards something and there's a lot of anticipation towards it, even if I achieve it, there's kind of a dull, like, not disappointment, but it's like, there's like a relief because there's a lot of anxiety about not achieving that. And then it's like a boredom and still a minor disappointment because it's like, why didn't I do better? I talked about this in one of my Reddit posts once where I got an IQ test done, and I was very much anticipating the results, very like anxious about it, very much like, oh my god, well, if this proves I'm worthless and stupid, I would hate that. And the results came back and they were well within the range that I was hoping they'd be in. And I just felt I felt a brief relief and satisfaction, and then I felt nothing. And I think that's very indicative of the nature of how maladaptive this constant pursuit of, self-esteem juice can be. Because it's never enough. Since I need it constantly, and then the expectations get higher and higher and higher of myself because of my inability to associate positive feelings with me as a person. They're all tied to my actions towards this praise. It's this continuous building, and it was a lot worse when I was younger, for sure. I found ways to be a lot more content with the amount of admiration and stuff that I get at a given time. But like, I remember when I was like in high school, especially, and then like early college, I would maintain these fucking horribly intricate social webs that were just expansive. I was completely overwhelmed by them. I was one of the happiest I've ever been in my life, I'm being honest. But I was completely overwhelmed by them. I had no way of managing it all on my own. I was constantly stressed out about it. But and the wild thing is, even though I had all these friend groups, I just wanted more. I was constantly on this search for more friends and more people to add to my fucking little empire. I literally called myself the emperor. It was fucking stupid. Because it was never enough, especially like not being aware of what my mechanisms were and finding more earnest joy in things rather than just regulating my self-esteem, getting people's attention and admiration and stuff. It was a very mixed bag, because on one hand I was stressed out all the time and like always fucking on the move, but on the other hand I was like, fuck, I felt good about myself. I would brag about how I had not spent, like literally over the course of a year, I did not spend a single day not with like a group of people. And that's insane when you think about it. I went over an entire year, I think I went 2 years, if I'm looking back on it. I had like a little bit of a break while doing my AP work. I hated that day. But like, I went fucking 2 years without a moment alone, because I was so afraid of that. I was so afraid of being alone and lonely and not feeling like I was worth anything that I fucking managed to bury that for 2 fucking years. That's fucking nuts. Holy shit. I didn't realize how fucking nuts that was until like I'm saying it aloud right now. And if I had the option, I would go back to doing that. That is preferable to spending one single day where I'm not getting that socialization and attention and admiration that I'm constantly seeking. And like, but to everybody around me, they would have no idea that I felt so shitty about myself. I hardly knew it at the time. Like, I would have this occasional, like, kind of, like, I would acknowledge it occasionally, but I was so good at being able to distract myself. And nowadays, it's like, I had to record this video like 4 times because each time I was like, I look disgusting and I messed up what I was saying. I need to restart. Like, and every time I'm recording a video, I'm looking at myself right now, like literally right now, I'm looking at myself. I'm like, oh my God, my hair's fucked up. I look disgusting. I hate my life. Why am I recording this? But I guarantee as soon as I'm getting like attention or from either from YouTube or whatever, that I am going to look at this video and be like, wow, I'm amazing, because it's all so externally based. I'm not saying that's a good thing at all, obviously. I hate that that's the case. Well, but like, you know, what else do you want to do in some cases? Obviously I'm in treatment, so hopefully I'll fix it eventually. But I mean, earnestly though, like, I kind of think about the idea of like, there's some people that can just sit and be alone and think, yep, I'm happy with the person that I am. That's mind-boggling to me. Inspires a lot of envy, obviously. Fucking, almost like that's a symptom criteria or something. But like, I can't wrap my mind around it. I really can't. I really wish I could, obviously, but like, it's just not there. There's never been a moment in my life where I've just been like, yeah, I'm cool being alone. I'm cool not having people pay attention to me, not admiring me. Because as soon as I'm alone, like, it's like, it's like, it feels like it's like I lose, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. Like, imagine like your body and sense of self is being like stretched out a bunch to like infinitely, where like all the atoms and shit are like separated super far apart. This is a very personal way to relate to it, obviously, but that's like how I feel. It's like I'm like being expanded, but like I'm not actually expanding. It's the distance between like the atoms in my body are being like stretched apart over like everything. It's like I completely like, it's like I lose who I am to like the universe, I guess. God, that sounds so stupid. I'm sorry. But yeah, like, I think it's very important. But yeah, I think that these studies are like super important for people to recognize. Because again, this was just subclinical narcissism. Imagine, you know, someone with actual MPD like me, how extreme of a case that could present with, and how hard people would try in order to hide those kind of things. It's not pleasant, and it reflects a reality of MPD that a lot of people don't acknowledge. Obviously, like, this need that we have isn't to justify any harm that people like us can cause, but it's a more realistic way of looking at the disorder in a way that can actually lead to healing and growth for everybody involved in something like that. Also, something very interesting in one of the studies is that they showed like people who are highly narcissistic it specified in men. I looked into why that was, and apparently the some of the more distressing aspects of pathological narcissism weren't observed in that relation was only observed in men and not in women, and also emotional dysregulation was only observed in the men and not the women, which I found like super interesting. That could either be a limitation of the study and maybe even proof that the study is wrong, or they hypothesized that there was a greater tolerance in women for like the dependency on the external validation stuff, which would make sense given that like in narcissistic men at least, it's like we kind of hate ourselves for that dependency, right? Like we hate that we need other people's approval. That's like almost makes us feel like demeaned, right? So it may not cause issues in life until you are basically to the pathological level if you are a woman, which would also make sense why it's overdiagnosed in men, is because maybe there is a similar amount of people with that constellation of personality traits, but it has to be a lot more extreme for it to cause distress in women just because of a higher tolerance, because what would represent an idealized aspect of them and like what is needed to maintain a narcissistic facade, so to speak, is more tolerable for women than for men. Like, for example, if I had no issue, like if my behavior was completely egocentric and I was successful at it and I didn't feel ashamed over doing it, I would still be pretty markedly different from a normal person, but I wouldn't consider myself mentally ill because it's like I'm not having any issues. So that may be the case in people who are subclinically narcissistic in women rather than the pathological level of NPD in women. Also, not to say that that means that, like, also, any women with NPD don't think that that means I'm saying, oh, like, narcissistic men suffer more, some shit like that. No, I'm just fucking, I didn't think about this at all before I made this video. I'm just fucking putting shit out there. It just shows how much more research has to be done on this, though. Because holy shit, like, the literature is so much more sparse than you would think, especially in regards to, like, personal experiences and neuroscans and shit like that. Really good studies done. Really cool. But yeah, that's my little tangent for today. Hope all of you guys have a good day. Hope you learned something. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. Do those things, please. I just spent a whole bunch of time talking about how I can only feel good about myself. You guys are admiring me. I'm just joking. Don't do it for that reason. Do it because you enjoyed the content. It was helpful. But also because I want it. Anyways, take your fucking meds. Have a good day. Goodbye.